The senator hid the truth about her family for 40 years, but when her son lost the boutique's proceeds and framed the cleaning lady, it all came out. He wanted to put her in jail for theft without knowing who she was. Subscribe so you don't miss stories like this. Write in the comments what country you're from. I read everything. I was hired on a Monday morning, no interviews, no background checks, no questions, just a clipboard with a line for my signature and a black polo shirt 2 sizes too big. They called me ma'am and grandma before they even knew my name. And I let them. That was the point. To them, I was just another invisible old woman with a mop, a body to pass by without a second glance. That was also the point. Rosario Jewels stood like a polished jewel box on the corner of 5th and Halston, a boutique made for the women who lunch and the men who lie. Its windows glittered with diamonds suspended on velvet, necklaces like spider webs of light, and rings that looked like they'd been stolen from royalty. The interior was all glass and marble, cool-toned and spotless, with a scent of white lilies and cash. It had a silence to it, not peace, but precision, the kind of hush you find in funeral homes and bank vaults, the kind that makes mistakes stand out like blood on snow. I arrived each morning before sunrise, took my key from the box beneath the stoop, and stepped into the dark with my cart. I moved like a ghost through the showroom, wiping down glass, scrubbing invisible footprints, emptying the bins that never filled. I made myself small, quiet, unremarkable. By the time the staff came in, sleek young women with perfect nails and sharper eyes, I was back in the shadows. No one ever said good morning. That was fine. I wasn't there to be seen. I had chosen this place for a reason. On my 3rd day, I saw him. Richard. That was how they said his name, in capitals, like it was a brand. He walked in with his phone glued to his ear, a double espresso in one hand, and a suit that cost more than what I'd make in a year. His hair was perfect. His smile was not. It was the kind that curled at one side and showed too many teeth. "Tell him I said no," he barked into the phone. "He wants 30%? He can go to hell." He paused as he passed me, barely registering the mop in my hand or the bucket at my feet. "Careful with the floor, Grandma," he added with a wink. "Slip and sue is not in the budget." I didn't respond. I kept my head down and scrubbed harder. He disappeared into the back office, and the women at the front desk exhaled in unison. One of them whispered something about bad mood Wednesdays. Another one rolled her eyes. They feared him, and it showed in the way they sat straighter when he walked by, the way they laughed too loudly at his jokes and flinched when he snapped. I started watching him more closely after that, not out of spite, though I would have been entitled to it, but out of curiosity. There was something in the way he moved, too fast and too loose, like he was dancing on a floor with cracks. He was always on the phone, always talking about numbers and promises. I heard phrases like, "Cover the loss, transfer today, she doesn't need to know." His hands shook sometimes when he thought no one was looking. I made a habit of lingering nearby, in the staff break room, behind the display cases, in the hall that led to the safe. He didn't notice. No one did. Sometimes, late in the afternoon, when the light hit just right and the shadows grew long across the showroom, I'd catch my reflection in the mirrored walls. An old woman in a uniform, bent and gray, a smear of age in a place made for youth and shine. But if I looked longer, if I stared into my own eyes, I saw something deeper. I saw the reason I was there. This wasn't about the job. This was never about the job. The boutique belonged to her, Grace Weston, senator, widow, saint of the suburbs. At least, that's what the press called her. Her photo hung in the hallway by the main office, smiling, perfect, in pearls. She hadn't set foot in the boutique in years, they said, too busy, too important. But I knew her. Knew her before she became someone else. Before the makeup and the speeches and the television lights. She was my sister. The last time I'd seen her in person was nearly 45 years ago, on the steps of our mother's funeral home. She wore a red dress and diamond earrings, and she left in a car with windows too tinted to see her face. She hadn't said goodbye. I watched her leave from behind the curtains. She never looked back. I didn't chase her. Life gave me enough to chase on its own. Work, bills, rent, silence. I kept my head down. I moved on. Or at least I told myself I had. Until last fall, when I saw her face on a billboard above the freeway. Re-election. Family values. Integrity. That was when something in me cracked. Not out of jealousy, not even out of anger. It was something older, something softer. I wanted to know, did she remember? Did she ever think about what she left behind? Did she know I had survived? Though I walked into Rosario Jewels and asked for a job, they took one look at my hands and said I could start Monday. And so I did. The boutique became my stage. I played my role well, quiet, invisible, dependable. But I watched, I listened, I waited. Each day, Richard unraveled a little more. He laughed too loud, then too quiet. He yelled at the accountant, accused the head of inventory of incompetence, and called 3 different women babe in the span of a week. He took long lunches and came back with bloodshot eyes. I saw him slip an envelope of cash to a man in a black cap near the service exit. I noted the date. I memorized the face. One night, I stayed late under the pretense of deep cleaning the marble near the vault. The boutique had emptied out, and Richard thought he was alone. I watched him from the hallway as he opened the safe, took out 3 stacks of bills, counted them, then stuffed them into his coat. He looked over his shoulder only once and then left. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. I already knew what he was. The next morning, he strutted in as if nothing had happened. He made jokes, flirted, insulted a new hire's shoes, and called someone a waste of payroll. But I saw the way his eyes darted to the security cameras. I saw the sheen of sweat on his temple. He was hiding something. Something big. And I had a feeling it wouldn't be long before he made someone else pay the price. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment on the edge of town, sipping tea with shaking hands. I pulled out the old tin box from under my bed, the one with yellowed photos and a wrinkled birth certificate. Grace Weston, born Grace Annette Robinson, sister of Martha Jean Robinson. I stared at her signature on the boutique's ownership documents, printed in bold black ink. I whispered her name. Grace! There were so many things I wanted to ask her. Why she left, why she never wrote, why she chose power over blood. But more than anything, I wanted her to see me, to look me in the eyes and remember. I didn't know if that day would ever come. But I was here now, in her boutique, in her world, and I was no longer afraid of the shadows. I had learned how to move through them like smoke. Because sometimes, to get close enough to the truth, you have to become invisible. And sometimes, the only way to be seen is to stop hiding. Tomorrow, I told myself, would be just another ordinary day. But I could feel it already. The storm was coming. It started like any other morning. I arrived before dawn, just as the street lamps flickered off and the sky turned that faint, washed-out gray. Rosario Jewels sat silent behind its armored glass, waiting to be awakened by polish and performance. I unlocked the service door with steady hands and slipped inside, the scent of waxed floors and stale lavender cleaner greeting me like an old friend. My cart stood where I left it, and for a brief moment it felt like routine would shield me from the storm I knew was coming. But the silence was different that day. Not soft or sleepy, tight, like something clenched. Even the walls felt tenser, like they were holding their breath. I pushed my cart across the showroom, letting the wheels hum along the marble, and started my work. The diamonds in the front window glinted dully in the pale light. Everything was just as it should be, perfect, pristine, untouched. But something in the air buzzed against my skin. At 8:12, Richard burst through the door. He wasn't wearing his usual crisp suit or polished shoes. His collar was open, his tie hanging from one hand, and his hair, normally sculpted into television-am perfection, was a mess of loose strands. His face was pale, jaw clenched tight, and there were bruised hollows beneath his eyes. He didn't greet anyone, didn't smirk or flirt or shout. He just stormed past the receptionist, tossed his tie onto the desk, and slammed his office door. The silence afterward was louder than the noise. Two of the salesgirls exchanged looks. Someone whispered something about last night's fundraiser. I kept my head down, wiping fingerprints that weren't there, but my ears were sharp. "He lost something," one said. "Probably another watch," the other replied with a giggle, but it was brittle. Richard's voice carried through the walls not long after. He was on the phone. Angry. Desperate. "I told you I'd have it," he snapped. "No, listen to me. I've got access, all right? Cash. Give me until tonight." He slammed something, then went silent. I moved toward the hallway near his office. My cart creaked on the tiles, and I slowed my steps, pretending to fiddle with a bottle of cleaner. Inside the office, more shouting. "I don't care how much you're down. You want it back, don't you? So do I." Then a pause. "No, no police. I said I'd fix it." When I looked through the narrow glass slit in the office door, I saw him gripping the desk like it was the only thing keeping him upright. That afternoon, I noticed the cameras had been realigned. One now pointed directly at the cleaning closet, another at the service door. A third, new, had been installed above the vault. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. That evening, after the boutique closed, I stayed late. There was a back corner in the stock room that always needed scrubbing, and no one ever questioned why I lingered. I moved slowly, letting the minutes pass, letting the place fall quiet. At 7:03, Richard returned. I heard his steps before I saw him, fast, nervous, irregular. He headed straight to the vault. I was careful, watching from the edge of the hallway where the light didn't reach. He fumbled with the keypad, opened the door, and pulled out 3 stacks of bills, the banded kind used for internal transfers. Money that shouldn't have left the building. He shoved them into a black leather envelope and tucked it inside his coat. Before leaving, he looked up at the camera and smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It was a dare. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Richard waltzed in wearing fresh clothes, sunglasses he didn't take off, and that smug air he always carried like cologne. He brought coffee for the receptionist, cracked a joke about long nights and longer poker faces, and even complimented a customer's shoes. But something in his shoulders was stiff, tight, like a man bracing for a punch. I felt it the moment I entered the back hallway later that day. My locker, old, dented, anonymous, had been jostled open. Inside, my cleaning supplies were untouched, but my gloves were missing. On the ground near the vault door, I found them, folded, placed, like a gift or a trap. A chill ran through me. When I checked the cleaning closet later, I noticed a small black pouch that wasn't mine. It had been placed behind the bleach bottles, carelessly, almost like someone had been in a hurry. Inside were several unmarked bills, not many, but enough to suggest theft if discovered in the wrong hands. I didn't touch them. I closed the closet slowly, heart pounding against my ribs. I wasn't panicked, I was angry. He was setting me up. 2 hours later, a security officer appeared in the boutique. Not one of the regulars. This man wore a badge. He walked straight to the receptionist and asked for Richard. Within minutes, the boutique became a stage. Richard emerged from his office, righteous indignation painted on his face, and called everyone into the showroom. "We have a situation," he said, voice steady but eyes wild. "There's been a breach. Cash is missing." The staff gasped. Some whispered. I stood at the edge, holding my mop like a shield. Richard pointed directly at me. "I regret to say that we have reason to suspect internal theft," he said, "from someone who had access. Someone unexpected." My name fell from his lips like a hammer. "Martha Robinson." The room spun. He gestured to the officer, who approached me with cautious hands. "We need to check your belongings," the man said. "Please." I nodded, said nothing. He opened my locker, found the cash fill on ours pouch in the closet, found the gloves near the vault. all pieces perfectly arranged, all pointing in one direction. I was escorted out through the front door. Not in handcuffs, but close enough. In the back seat of the patrol car, I sat in silence. The city passed by in streaks of gray and gold, and I let it blur. My hands didn't shake. I'd known this day would come. At the precinct, I gave them my name, my full name. Martha Jean Robinson. The officer looked up sharply. Something flickered across his face. He stood and left the room. Minutes later, he returned with a different man in a charcoal suit and thick glasses. "You're being released," he said without preamble. "No charges. Someone pulled your file and called in a favor." I stared at him. "Who?" He hesitated. "Grace Weston's office, legal counsel." My breath caught. I was driven to a quiet office building uptown. A sleek black car waited in front. Inside sat a man I didn't recognize. Mid-50s, too polished to be real. "I'm Michael Miss Weston's attorney," he said. I didn't respond. He murmured, "She asks that you be brought here immediately." I climbed into the car without a word. The ride was silent. The city pulsed outside the tinted windows, but I kept my gaze fixed forward. When we arrived at the office suite, everything was marble and glass, like the boutique, but colder, more sterile. The receptionist didn't speak, just gestured toward a frosted door at the end of the hall. Inside, Grace sat alone. She hadn't changed. The same perfect posture, the same cream-colored suit, the same lipstick I remembered from 100 years ago. But her eyes, they held fear. She looked up as I entered. Didn't stand, just stared. "Martha," she said, softly, like a confession. I stood in the doorway, unsure whether I wanted to step forward or walk away. "You should have left this alone," she said. I laughed once. Dry. Bitter. "You always thought that was my problem. I never knew when to disappear." She didn't deny it. "He doesn't know," she said quietly. "Maybe he should," I replied. She flinched, just slightly. "I never wanted this," she added, voice almost a whisper. "Then why did you let it happen?" I asked. Silence. Outside the window, the sun dipped behind the buildings. Shadows crawled across the glass. "I came back," I said, finally, "not for revenge, not even for you." She met my eyes then, truly looked at me. "I came because I needed to know if you still remembered me, or if I was just one more thing you erased on your way up." Grace stood. Slowly, her hands trembled. "I never forgot," she said. "I just didn't know how to fix it." The door behind me opened. Michael stepped in. "We have to go," he said. Grace nodded. Her voice dropped to a whisper again. "Please, just walk away." I looked at her one last time. I did for 40 years. Then I turned and walked out. But this time, I wasn't walking away. I was walking towards something. Something true. The night after I walked out of Grace's office, I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair by the window, the same chair I'd had for 20 years, with its sun-faded cushion and threadbare arms, and I stared out at the quiet street below. The lights of the bakery across the road flickered off one by one, the alley cats yowled and disappeared, and the city sank into that deep hush that comes just before dawn. But I didn't move. My thoughts circled like moths around a flame, drawn again and again to the look in Grace's eyes. Not fear, not guilt, something smaller, sadder, like the remnants of a woman who had lost the right words too many years ago. I had come back not to punish her, not even to reclaim anything. I had only wanted the truth, a conversation, some acknowledgement that I hadn't imagined it all. Our childhood, our bond, the mother who raised us, the father who broke everything. But she had chosen silence, and now silence was all she had left. Except silence wasn't going to protect her this time, not from the mess her son had made, not for me. The next morning, I pulled out the old tin box from beneath my bed. It still smelled of cedar and dust and time. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were the last pieces of a life left behind. Faded photos, brittle receipts, a birthday card I never sent. In the bottom corner was the envelope I'd saved for decades, the one with my original birth certificate. The hospital logo smudged and torn at the edge. I ran my fingers over the names printed there. Martha Jean Robinson. Grace Annette Robinson. Twin sisters. I had been born 2 minutes before her. I used to joke that those 2 minutes made me wiser. She'd always say they made her prettier. That was how we were. Mirrored halves of something whole. Until we weren't. After Mama died, everything changed. Grace was taken in by our aunt, the one who lived in the nicer neighborhood, the one with the white gloves and the country club smile. I was sent to a home. I remember the car ride like it happened yesterday. Grace with her red coat and new shoes, me with a cardboard suitcase and a box of crackers Mama had packed. We waved through the window, and that was the last time I saw her until the funeral. That day, she wore lipstick and grief like they were matching accessories. She kissed the casket and left before the dirt was thrown. I watched from a tree at the edge of the cemetery. No one saw me. For years, I followed her life from a distance, first through whispers in the papers, then through headlines. She rose fast, speaking about justice, about dignity, about giving voice to the voiceless. I never knew whether to laugh or cry when I heard her say those things. The sister who forgot her own blood was now a champion for strangers. I never wrote, never reached out. Part of me believed she would come find me when she was ready. Another part knew she never would. So I built my life with what I had. I cleaned houses, scrubbed hospital floors, took care of dying women who mistook me for their daughters. I learned to live small, to want little, to disappear in plain sight. And I did it well. But after Grace's face showed up on a billboard last year, something shifted. I couldn't ignore the past anymore. I needed to see it for myself. Who she'd become, what she'd built, and whether any trace of the girl I'd once loved still lived inside her. That was what led me to Rosario Jewels. And that was what kept me there, even now, after the accusations, after the arrest, after the wordless warning she'd tried to give me with those shaking hands. She wanted me gone, that much was clear, but it was too late. I'd seen too much. I'd felt the cracks in the polished floor, heard the panic in her son's voice, watched the lies multiply like mold in corners no one cleaned. I knew I had to act carefully. No one would believe the word of a 70-year-old janitor over the son of a senator. But I also knew how to watch without being watched. I had been doing it all my life. I started collecting evidence. Quietly, deliberately. I noted every time Richard arrived late, every time he left early, every delivery he signed for that never made it to the shelves. I memorized codes, memorized names, memorized dates. I borrowed an old disposable phone from a thrift shop and used it to take photos when no one was looking. I even managed to copy a few documents from the inventory system while the assistant manager was on lunch break. One night, while emptying the trash in Richard's office, I found a small receipt tucked beneath the shredder. It was from a private club, the Marlin, known for its exclusive poker rooms. A handwritten note on the back read, "Settle by Thursday or lose the watch." I took it. Another night, I overheard him on the phone pacing the hallway just outside the break room. "I already moved it. You'll have the full drop in Cayman by tomorrow." I wrote down every word. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed. He had been skimming from the boutique for months, maybe longer, using the cash for gambling, for offshore deals, for debts that only kept growing. And when things got tight, he'd decided to pin it on the one person no one would believe. The old woman in the corner. The one who didn't talk. The one who, in his mind, had nothing to lose. But he was wrong. I had the truth. And I wasn't afraid to use it. I made 3 copies of everything, photos, notes, receipts, even a few video clips from the security cameras I'd quietly redirected with help from an old maintenance man who still owed me a favor from the hospital days. One copy I placed in a sealed envelope and gave to Grace's lawyer, Michael, during a chance encounter in the elevator. I didn't say what was inside. I just said, She'll want to read this. The second copy I hid inside the boutique, tucked behind a loose panel in the mop closet. The third I kept in my apartment, in the tin box, beneath the old photos and brittle memories. Then I waited. 2 weeks later, the boutique called a meeting. Mandatory, everyone was to attend. Management, sales staff, even the janitorial crew. That included me. I arrived early, dressed as always, and took my usual place near the back. The showroom had been cleared of customers. The lights were dimmed slightly. Richard stood at the front, shoulders back, voice cool. "There's been an incident," he began, looking around the room like a preacher surveying his flock. "Some of you may have heard rumors. I want to be clear. We are investigating internal theft." He glanced directly at me. I met his eyes. He continued, laying out his carefully constructed narrative. The missing cash, the suspicious behavior, the planted evidence. He spoke with conviction, authority. Until I stepped forward. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't shout, I simply said, "That's not the truth." He froze. I walked to the center of the room and pulled a small flash drive from my pocket. "This is the truth," I said, and handed it to the assistant manager. She plugged it into the showroom laptop. The footage played on the screen behind us, Richard taking cash from the vault, placing items into his coat, making phone calls laced with threats and desperation. Dates, times, faces. The room fell silent. When it ended, no one moved. I looked at Richard. His face had gone white. "You tried to ruin me," I said, voice steady, "but you forgot something." He didn't speak. "I've been watching you longer than you've been alive." Then I turned to Grace, who had entered midway through the video, flanked by Michael and another aide. She looked at the screen, then at her son, then at me, and she said nothing. That was the hardest part. Not Richard's lies, not the humiliation, not even the years we'd lost. It was her silence. She didn't defend me. She didn't condemn him. She just stood there, frozen in a silence she had chosen long ago. And I realized in that moment that she was never going to be the sister I remembered. Not because she couldn't, because she wouldn't. When the room finally emptied and Richard was taken aside by a private investigator sent by the board, I lingered by the display case near the exit. I looked at the necklace inside, emeralds in a gold setting, identical to the one our mother used to wear on Sundays. Grace came to stand beside me. "I didn't ask for this," she said. I didn't look at her. "No, but you let it happen." She didn't reply. I turned to leave. "You always chose silence," I said. "But silence is a choice, Grace, and now everyone knows what it costs." Then I walked away. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. Some ties break with noise. Ours had broken with quiet. The days that followed felt like walking through the wreckage of someone else's storm. Rosario Jewels remained closed for a week, its glossy doors locked, the temporarily under review sign hanging crookedly in the window like a bandage that wouldn't hold. The staff scattered, some to other jobs, some to silence. The ones who stayed behind pretended not to know anything, though their eyes flickered when mine met theirs. The air had shifted. I had become visible in a place built to make women like me disappear. Richard vanished. Not all at once, but in stages. First, his name disappeared from the company registry, then from the directory on the office door, then from the public photographs online. I heard whispers that he had left the country. A friend of mine who cleaned at the airport said she saw him board a flight to Zurich in the middle of the night, sunglasses on. Jaw clenched. It didn't matter where he went, his story had already sunk. There was talk of an investigation. Federal, quiet, coiled like a snake. The boutique was no longer just a business, it had become a symbol. And symbols can't afford rot. Grace, for her part, retreated. Her press appearances stopped, her speeches were canceled. For the first time in over a decade, she disappeared from the headlines. I imagined her behind glass doors and thick curtains, watching her empire from the shadows, wondering how it had all come loose. No one asked me to come back to work, but one Monday morning a letter arrived at my apartment. Heavy cardstock, no return address. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten in tight, even strokes. "The boutique is open, you are welcome." There was no signature, but I recognized the handwriting. I arrived the next day in the same uniform, the same shoes, but something in me felt different. I wasn't there to clean floors anymore. I wasn't there to watch or hide or wait. I was simply there because I chose to be. The boutique was quieter now. No music, no idle chatter. The shine remained, but it felt less artificial, more human. The assistant manager, her name was Clara, greeted me with a nod. Nothing more, but there was respect in it. Later that afternoon, as I polished the last pane of glass near the front, Clara approached me. She held a folder in one hand, her expression uncertain. "We're restructuring," she said. "New oversight, new ethics board. There's an opening in guest relations. It's part-time, but—" She trailed off. I looked at the folder but didn't reach for it. "I'm not here for promotion," I said. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I didn't think you were." Before she walked away, she added, "But you should know. The board wants you to stay. They've seen the footage. They know what you did." I nodded. That was enough. In the following weeks, I stayed on, not as janitor, not as manager, but simply as Martha. I did what needed doing. I answered phones. I polished cases. I watched over the younger girls when the new head of operations tried to talk down to them. And when tourists came in asking about the infamous theft scandal, I handed them brochures and said we only sold jewelry, not stories. Some days, I thought of leaving. I had proved my point. I had found the truth. But something kept me tethered, not to the boutique itself, but to the quiet dignity of standing in a place that once erased me and being seen. Then, one late afternoon as the sun slipped past the tall windows and cast long golden stripes across the floor, she appeared. Gray. She walked in without entourage, without announcement, just her and a pale gray coat and sunglasses too large for her face. The boutique quieted. Even Clara stepped aside. Grace stood near the central display, the one that held the heirloom pieces, the sapphire brooch, the emerald choker, the ring that used to belong to a queen. She didn't touch anything, just stood there looking. I approached slowly, not with caution, with choice. She didn't turn when I reached her side. "I used to think I could build something perfect," she said, almost to herself. "Clean, untouchable, if I worked hard enough. If I stayed silent long enough." I waited. "But the silence didn't protect me," she added. "It just made everything fester." She turned then, and for the first time in years, we looked at each other without armor. "I came to give you this," she said, reaching into her coat. In her hand was a small velvet pouch. I recognized it before I opened it. Inside was a locket. Old, oval, worn smooth by time. Our mothers? I opened it. Inside was a photo, black and white, grainy, 2 girls in matching dresses, hair in ribbons, faces pressed together. Yes, I felt something loosen in my chest. Grace didn't say anything else. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She just placed her hand on mine, briefly, and left. I stood there long after the door had closed behind her, the pouch still in my palm, the locket warming in my skin. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel hollow. I felt full. Of grief, yes, of memory, but also of something else. A few nights later, I took the bus to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to low fences and peeling porches. I visited the cemetery, not the one where Mama had been buried, but the place where we had first lived, long ago. I stood near the rusted gate and let the wind tangle my hair. In my hand, I held the locket. I didn't need to bury it. I didn't need to leave it behind. I only needed to remember. I thought of everything that had led me here, the lies, the silence, the betrayal, but also the strength, the endurance, the quiet watching that had kept me alive all these years. I had walked through their world and come out clean. Not spotless, not untouched, but whole. And that was enough. Back in the city, the boutique returned to its rhythm. New hires came and went, the displays changed, the music returned. But something in its foundation had shifted. People noticed me now. They asked my opinion. They listened. And every morning, as I pushed open the front doors and stepped into the soft light of the showroom, I felt it in my bones. I was not a shadow. I was not a mistake. I was not forgotten. I had spoken the truth. And the truth had set me free. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe for more, share the video with someone who needs to hear it, and check out the next one for another powerful story.